Good morning, everyone. The lecture continues all across media, from Twitter to CTV to the newspapers and beyond, and I'm sure Facebook conversations. I'm not on Facebook too much, so, but etc. Right? And I find it interesting that these liberals are still feeling comfortable enough to lecture Canadians, despite, there's a whole article that talks about reasons why maybe focusing on this is not such a great idea that I'm going to read in just a minute. But I want to play this clip very quickly of Ahmed Hussen talking with Evan Solomon. And this is CTV Power Play. And the quote is, "I've been followed in stores. My back gets up when a police cruiser comes behind me as I drive," said Minister Hussen, speaking about the daily reality of racism in Canada. You know, man, here we go.
Lived experience and the reality, the daily reality for too many Canadians of color who go through this every single day. I have been followed in stores. I instinctively, my back gets up when a police cruiser comes behind me as I drive. This is a daily reality for too many people.
For you, when you see a police cruiser, your back gets up? Because you're a minister of the crown. That is incredible. I'm not saying it doesn't. That still stuns me, even though it shouldn't, but it does.
So Minister Hussen says because of the history of profiling, that's why his back gets up. And Evan backs off right away. He sounds very incredulous and then backs off and says, "Oh, that shouldn't stun me, but it does stun me." And I mean, I don't think a racist nation would necessarily elect to one of the highest offices a black refugee. If they were a racist nation doesn't do that, right? The majority of people or whatever are supposed to be represented by an election, right? You can have a majority of people represented in the House of Commons, and even in a specific riding, a majority of people elected Mr. Hussen. Does that happen in a racist society? Does him getting his back up if a police cruiser is around say, yes, you live in a racist society, or does it speak to maybe something else? Is there maybe some other reason for that? Do these liberals, whose leader has dressed in blackface so often that he can't remember how many times he did it, did they have the moral authority to lecture Canadians on this? We turn to Rex Murphy to find out. And this is a National Post article. And Rex Murphy says, "Canada is not a racist country, despite what the Liberals say." I agree with this. I scroll down to the part that matters. It wasn't the kayaking picture that originally caught my attention. It was another of the former environmental ministers, Catherine McKenna's endless Twitter bulletins commenting on the protests and riots. They're both, and lately mainly the latter, riots, now sweeping across the United States. Right now, thousands, if not millions, are marching, fighting, and protesting for their basic human rights. We need to acknowledge that racism and discrimination are part of our reality here in Canada and around the world, and we all need to call it out. There we go. There's calling it out, right? You got to call it out. I talked about that yesterday. We have to do better, wrote McKenna, before a similar demonstration took place in Montreal on Sunday. Similar being there was looting. Different because there were arrests. Okay, back to this. What's going on in the U.S. right now might have begun for some as a protest in support of basic human rights, but however it began, it has now morphed into scenes of pure violence, random acts, arson, and something close to actual anarchy. It would have been good of the minister to have acknowledged the very troubling mixed nature of the events. Yes, some people are engaging in legitimate protest, as is their right, but many of them have engaged in looting, mayhem, destruction of property, threats, arson, and deliberate confrontations with police. Looking through the news and social media reports online, one can easily find scenes of individuals being furiously beaten by some of the mob, a police precinct abandoned to flames, a small store destroyed right in front of its owner, and the attempted arson of the historic St. John's Church in Washington, D.C. St. John's is a revered institution because every U.S. president since James Madison has attended services there. I'm not sure how attempting to burn down a church, which is also a national symbol, figures under the banner of protesting for human rights. The second part of McKenna's tweet, quote, "We need to acknowledge that racism and discrimination are part of our reality here in Canada and around the world, and we all need to call it out," was more troubling to me because it was yet another example of a liberal leveraging a situation happening somewhere else to create an opportunity to lecture Canadians. That's exactly what happened here. Okay? Right? It's the same thing. They're continuing the lecture, which they do not have the moral authority to give. Their leader dresses in blackface, probably on weekends, just to make sure he remembers how it feels. I mean, he loved it in the early 2000s, right? Did it so many times he can't remember. When was the last time you dressed in blackface? Next question. Can we throw him out? Yeah, just get the RCMP on him. Manhandle him a bit, no bruises. Right? Or did Kean have bruises? I'm not sure. Anyway, he doesn't take hard questions is my point, right? Does a racist country elect Ahmed Hussen? Come on. Back to this. Lecturing Canadians don't have the authority. Okay, back to this. In dissecting her statement, it would be helpful to have some more details. How much are racism and discrimination actually a part of Canadian reality? Are they overwhelmingly present? Are they, in McKenna's view, a central part of Canadian life? Where do they manifest themselves? Are some provinces more racist and more discriminatory than others? If any of the answers to those questions is yes, then we have far bigger problems than COVID-19. Another question: is it only those in higher echelons of the Liberal Party who have a clear view of all this racism and discrimination? Indeed, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has spoken in much the same terms. This is the same speech that Trudeau gave yesterday. I covered it yesterday, so I'm not going to go over it again. You can read it again if you want to. Link is in the description. Do we not, this is back to Rex Murphy, do we not have welcoming immigration policies? Are our largest cities not a great montage of people from every corner of the world, of every color and creed? Do we not, both in private and public, celebrate Canada's multicultural nature? Do our schools not press the idea of tolerance and acceptance towards all people and all faiths from kindergarten through high school? Is it not a doctrine of Canadian civic life that to end any trace of discrimination or racism is a cardinal rationale for the very existence of modern Canada? In fact, I think that's overstating it a little bit. In fact, to give Canada credit, it has for decades now worked in every venue, from corporations to the public service to the arts and universities, to set goals and standards designed to eliminate pernicious bigotries. It is therefore strange that after so much honest effort, so many advances in public thought and practice, so great a march from those times past when racism and bigotry were indeed rife and accepted, that an inventory of how far we have come is never taken, that the advances remain unacknowledged or unspoken, and that the citizens hear so often from their betters. I don't like calling them that. Let's call them leaders. Let's call them current leaders, from their current leaders, how racist and discriminatory they are. To any fair mind, Canada is a mature, welcoming, open-minded, and generous country. It would be helpful if these Liberals kept the full story of this country in mind when discussing racism, not leap so reflexively to grim characterizations of a country that, while not perfect, has been doing its best to be tolerant and welcoming. And this morning, there was a whole series of tweets with black boxes saying Black Lives Matter. And I started replying to them saying, like, are you crazy? Like, these protests are funded riots. Black Lives Matter is funded by an NGO. Here's a former organizer from Black Lives Matter from 2017. Like, there are things out there that fly in the face. There's evidence out there that flies in the face of this narrative that our leadership is pushing, right from like university presidents, magazines, newspapers, municipal leaders, like mayors and city councilors. All of the people are jumping on this like it is legitimately about racism. And rioting is not about racism. Rioting is not. Like, this is something else. This is not rioting for George Floyd. And if it was about George Floyd, that didn't happen in Canada. That happened in the United States. Why are Canadian leaders leveraging this to lecture or virtue signal for Canadians? It is offensive. It is ridiculous. And I'm sick and tired of it. Okay, I want to make one point with this article. I've already gone. Oh, okay, it's not as long as I thought. Okay, this article is about Guelph. I live in Guelph, so I thought it was interesting. It says, in Guelph, Canada's other epidemic flares up. My one point in this article is, in 2020, we have had 11 deaths from overdoses, and we've had 9 deaths from coronavirus. That's from this article. What are we doing? We shut down the economy for the coronavirus, and we've had more deaths from overdoses. I just think that it is, well, our approach is wrong. We currently have, here's the mayor of Guelph talking about, somebody was asking about whether, as the weather heats up, what's the plan for cooling centers? And Cam's reply, Cam Guthrie is the mayor of Guelph. He says, that's a good question. I'll ask today, however, anyone experiencing homelessness already has their own hotel room at this time. And I don't think that necessarily helps the kids in high rises that don't have air conditioning. But, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the problems we did solve, right? Not the problems we didn't. Anyway, regardless, back to this. Here's the article. It says, as the coronavirus swept across the country, plunging millions into lockdown, the southern Ontario city, Guelph, was seeing a surge in another more familiar killer. 6 people died of suspected drug overdose in just 6 weeks in April and May. A big number for a place that saw 7 die from overdoses in all of last year. The city has seen 9 die as of last Thursday from COVID-19. I scroll down. Here's on May 13th, it issued another warning. On May 13th, it issued another warning saying that 3 people had died within 36 hours of suspected overdose. A local overdose information system shows 55 overdoses overall in the 8 weeks to May 20th, fatal and otherwise, while another fatal one just recorded. Guelph is up to 11 deaths in 2020. So I've had people reach out to me in Guelph telling me that the city uses money for COVID-19 to put people in hotel rooms to drive people to and from the safe injection site. And whether they do or not is immaterial, but I know the safe injection site exists. And I think that maybe our approach is wrong, right? There are places in the United States that tie services for help to you must cease use of the drug. And it seems really strange to, and I used to work in kind of the field. I didn't work directly in addictions, but I worked with a lot of people who did work in addictions. And generally, if you continue giving the opportunity for safe drugs to people, they'll continue taking the drugs, right? Because drugs are addictive, right? But if you tie treatment, and if somebody actually wants to get help and service, if you tie treatment to ceasing service, maybe you'll get somewhere. Maybe you'll get results, right? Maybe you won't have as many deaths as COVID-19, or a few more, right? Like 11 deaths for overdoses, 9 deaths for COVID-19, right? Right? Is it crazy to think we shut the economy down for this? Is it crazy to think that we are throwing money hand over fist to protect people while also allowing them to inject poisonous substances into their arms? Like, it just defies reason. It seems absolutely inverted, right? If I'm wrong, I'm fine to be wrong. I have an opinion on this and I'm going to share it, and that's the point. But this just seems nuts. It just seems like, what are we doing? Here's another one. Here's COVID-19 and Dr. Tam saying, you can go protest. If you want to go protest, go protest. No problem. I want to underline, you know what, maybe we should do this first. Here it is. Premier Doug Ford pushing to extend Ontario's state of emergency to June 30th. That's today. This is being reported yesterday. They're voting on it today. Premier Doug Ford is pushing to extend Ontario's COVID-19 state of emergency until June 30th. As the current emergency declaration, which has been in effect since March 17th, expires Tuesday, Ford's majority Progressive Conservatives want another 28-day extension. But independent MP Randy Hillier hopes to force the government to share the rationale for the move with Ontarians. Hillier will introduce a motion in the legislature on Tuesday that would compel the government to make public all the agenda minutes and discussions of COVID-19 command table, justifying the need for another 4 weeks of emergency measures. Scroll down a little bit. Hillier, a former Conservative member ejected from caucus last year for speaking truth to power. This is a Star article, so said people are wary of the government, so they're trying to use it to have a negative slant on Ford. My purpose is just to show that they're extending the emergency. I think they're going to extend the emergency deadline, or the Emergency Act, until the June 30th, the end of June, which is, if you knew in March that it was going to be until Canada Day, and they make the point here, like, would you have accepted this? I don't know, right? Like, man, it seems wild. Anyway, the initial 2-week state of emergency I was in favor of, said Hillier, but 11 weeks later, the MPP is concerned Ford, who skipped both the legislature's question periods last week, wants to continue governing without adequate accountability and transparency. I don't see how you can come to any other conclusion, said Hillier. Ontario's state of emergency gives sweeping powers to the government under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, introduced March 17th. It was extended on March 30th and then on April 14th and again on May 12th. Tory House Leader Paul Calendra's motion to extend it until June 30th will be debated by MPPs on Tuesday, but with a huge PC majority, it will easily pass. That means much of Ontario will have effectively been on lockdown from St. Patrick's Day until Canada Day. Ontario is currently in stage 1 of its framework for reopening the economy. That allows stores with street entrances to reopen, but limits gatherings of groups to 5 or less unless they reside in the same household. In the second stage, which will only begin when public health officials declare that the number of new COVID-19 cases is declining, the government will consider opening more workplaces, including some service industries and more shops, opening more public spaces such as outdoor play structures and public pools, and allow slightly larger gatherings of perhaps up to 10 people. So still lockdown, but if you want to protest, here's Dr. Tam.
One thing that people may want to consider is that, of course, wearing a mask is important, but shouting and making really loud sort of projections can potentially increase the risk. And so, I might want to choose other means of showing or messaging, whether it's be signage or making noise using other instruments, for example. It's just to consider that, shouting and that type of behavior can potentially project more droplets. But one thing that...
Okay, so if I've got this right, we can not go to work. We cannot visit our friends or relatives. We can't walk our dogs. We can't use play structures. But we can go to a protest so long as we don't shout. And maybe we should wear a mask. The inconsistencies in this government, the inconsistencies in the messaging, the inconsistencies in what we can do, wear a mask, don't wear a mask. We can't cross provincial borders. Borders don't work, right? Like we were told closing borders don't work. We can't possibly, viruses don't know borders. Why would we close borders? You can't go to Quebec and you can't go to the United States. Like, okay. And you can't go camping across borders. If you're from Alberta, you stay in Alberta to go camping. If you're from Saskatchewan, you can camp in Saskatchewan, but not anywhere else, not other provinces, right? Like you understand every single time the government does this, they lose credibility, and they don't have credibility left. Like they have zero credibility. They're lecturing us on racism. Like yesterday I had a picture of blackface Justin Trudeau, and I mean, like, I'm just not going to go back to that, but like they're lecturing us on racism. They have zero moral authority to do that. They keep giving us conflicting advice. You could go protest. Sure, you go protest those police. Definitely. They're overpaid and blah, 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 right? Like, I mean, that's the messaging here, right? Anarchy and we hate police and Black Lives Matter, right? Like, that's the whole thing. But don't you dare do it if you're protesting to have your business reopened. Then you're a bunch of yahoos. What is happening with our leadership? Seriously. And now they want to kick this down the can for another 30 days, another 28 days. Like, how is a restaurant supposed to manage that? How is a small business supposed to manage that? If you were just barely holding on, hoping for June 2nd, June 3rd to be back to normal, June 9th to be back to normal, like June 9th is still another week away. But like no hope of that. Now, done. And if your summer starts, like usually summer starts May 2-4 weekend, right? For a business, right? And you get the kids on the weekend and elderly, older people who aren't working, retired people torn through, right? Like, but there's nothing now. And there's no hope of anything now. So July to save the summer, July and August, with all this conflicting information, come on. Yeah. Canadian health officials, this is City News, urge rally goers to keep COVID-19 in mind. Again, if you protest lockdown and because you want to open your business, you're a bunch of yahoos. This one they're saying, oh, it's fine, just keep physical distancing in mind. Sure. As protesters keep their anti-racism rallies on both sides of the border, top health officials are hoping they don't forget about the risks of COVID-19. Canadian health officials are not suggesting people avoid protests. No, that would be undemocratic. Stay in your houses or we'll fine you, you yahoos. Right? Are you doing a chin-up? There's an $800 fine, buddy. Didn't you get the notice? Oh, you're protesting. Okay. Those are protest chin-ups? Sorry, man. Black Lives Matter. Right? But they're suggesting the importance of hand sanitizer and masks. If they could do it with hand sanitizer and masks, why are our parliamentarians not in the House of Parliament or the House of Commons? It's like, seriously, right? Oh, is Dr. Tam a professional or is she just making it up? Chris Rock, take it away. Right? Jeepers creepers. It's just annoying. I mean, it's more than annoying, right? It's offensive. These are our leaders. And it's not like we have a mechanism to bring this government down, even though we have a minority government. It's not like they could say, oh, hold on a second, we're going to have this vote, and it's a confidence vote right now, tomorrow, next day, legislative calendar is open for debate. It's not. We have 4 sitting days in the summer. We're not back until September 21st. And you want to bet how much? They're going to say it's still an emergency, everyone. We're sitting back saying Doug Ford can extend it till the 28th. Moving on. Globe and Mail is reporting Trudeau rejects Trump's suggestion to expand Group of 7 and to readmit Russia. Trump wanted to admit a bunch of other countries as well. He wanted India. South Korea, Russia, India, Australia. And according to this, Trudeau said no because of Russia's invasion of Crimea. I don't know the status of the other 3, but it wouldn't be G7 anymore, would it? G10? Anyway, It's interesting. I'll pay attention. Here's a National Post saying the new coronavirus losing potency, top Italian doctor says. I just wanted to highlight this because here's Italy. This is May 31st. We're a couple of days out from that, but it's June 2nd today. The doctor says the new coronavirus is losing its potency. Well, the article says this. The new coronavirus is losing its potency and has become much less lethal, a senior Italian doctor said on Sunday. Quote, in reality, the virus clinically no longer exists in Italy, said Alberto Zangrillo, the head of the San Raffaele Hospital in Milan, in the northern region of Lombardy, which has borne the brunt of Italy's coronavirus contagion. It seems like it kind of surged and then faded away. I think that perhaps this might be over now. But Canada is not going to behave that way. And even if we start to behave that way, right? Go to your protests, you protesters. Even if we start to behave that way, then it's going to be a long time before we're back to normal, right? Like, and when the messaging has been so inconsistent, when the messaging is conflicted and been just wrong, like out and out wrong, so often, how do you have the citizenry regain confidence in the recommendations of the government, right? Like, at this point, it just doesn't make any sense what they're recommending. And I don't know any rationale for the extension of the 28 days. So in order to protect long-term care homes, can we not do that with also opening up the economy if we know what the vulnerable populations are? It just seems, again, like, short-sighted leadership. And, I don't necessarily agree with the slant of the Toronto Star's articles. It's not about taking down Doug Ford. I think he's doing his best, but I think that I don't see any justification for another 28 days. And I would love to see the rationale for it. I would love to see what Doug Ford believes another 30 days will do. And maybe it's because the schools are still closed and they can't start opening up properly until after the schools are open, because parents will say, where are my kids going to go? Yeah, I mean, there's a factor there, but if that's the case, then that should be communicated, right? Like if it's an economic reason or a school reason or whatever, I don't think you can use the schools as an excuse to keep businesses closed. I don't know that they're that I don't think they're that tied. Like, it's not like you're sending 30 kids to Walmart every day and they're interacting with all of those kids and all of those kids' families, etc., right? Like, it just doesn't it doesn't hold water. They're two different entities, right? And so maybe that's it. But even then, it would offer an opportunity, right? The workforce that doesn't have kids and isn't encumbered by that can go back to work, and then that could offer a testing situation to see what the spread is, and then more importantly, what the ICU rates are. Because if this is gone or not as serious as once thought, the Italian doctor said it's not nearly as lethal, and it's effectively gone in Italy because the virus loads are so much lower. Then that's wonderful, right? That'd be valuable data to have. And a population that's strong enough most of the time, if you're a server, you're probably lower. You're certainly not 65, let's say, most of the time, right? Most servers I see aren't 65, although there are older ones. I'm rambling now. Okay, I'm going to stop. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I don't mean to insult any older waitresses. I'm saying, like, if you work in like a bar or something like that, I know there are a lot of older waitresses and waiters and whatever. More older waitresses than waiters. I'm really rambling today. Have a good one, everyone.